So I want to begin this morning with engaging the story of Jesus coming into the world through the lens of history for just a few minutes. When Jesus was born, Rome was the only power in the world that mattered. This superpower, this empire, extended from England to India in the first century. And Rome was ruled by Caesars. And Caesar, or emperor worship in the first century Roman Empire, was huge. So here's a list of the Caesars throughout the first century. And here's how it started. Julius Caesar, a very powerful, important person, died. And when he died, 12 witnesses came forward. And they said, at the moment of his death, we saw a comet move across the sky. And his son, Augustus, comes forward and says, well, of course you did. This was my father ascending up into the heavens, taking his rightful place among the gods. My father Julius is now God. And if his father Julius is now God, what does this make Augustus? Son of God. And Augustus was brilliant when it came to branding himself as the Son of God, and he soon took power and was the new emperor for the Roman Empire at the turn of the first century. He was the new emperor, the Caesar, when Jesus was born. This was a man of great, great ego. For his birthday, he demanded that everyone in the empire set aside 12 days to celebrate his birthday. Some of you are thinking, this is exactly the way it should be for my birthday. And get this, he called it Advent because he said, for these 12 days, we will prepare for the reign that is to come. And it's not just me reigning over some of the world, but the reign that is to come is when I will reign over the entire world. Virgil, he was a poet at the time Augustus was in power, first century poet, right before the turn of the first century. And Virgil said this of Augustus. He said, Augustus is the one who is to come. He will be the divine king of salvation for whom mankind has waited. Augustus will annihilate the evil of the past and free the people from unceasing fear. Caesar Augustus will establish a universal empire of peace and will lead toward a renewed humanity. Can you think of anyone else in the first century at this time who was referred to in similar ways? Worship of the emperor was huge. In fact, on first century coins, you see the face of Caesar, and above the face of Caesar are the words, Caesar is Lord. It was common greeting in the empire, Caesar is Lord, or Caesar, King of Kings. Caesar, Lord of Lords, Caesar, Prince of Peace. So I want to fast forward in the first century for just a moment to Domitian. Domitian is the new emperor, the new Caesar by the end of the first century. Domitian was interesting. And by interesting, I mean historians tell us that he was the most brutal, oppressive, violent emperor that the Roman Empire had yet seen. Here's what he did. He was known for parading into cities, especially on his birthday. And you see, ancient Greco-Roman cities, they would build these altars to the emperor, to the Caesar. Some would even have temples built in their name. And so Domitian would parade through the city, and he would stop at one of the altars, and he would literally demand the people come out and bow down to him. And then he would go to the next altar, and people were demanded to come out and bow, and then the next altar. And if on this day when he was in your town, you chose not to bow to him, you were publicly killed, or you simply disappeared. Historians tell us that Domitian was really good at making people disappear. He was also known for the Domitian Games, which is much like the Olympic Games, what we have. You may have heard of them, which is a whole nother sermon. Another thing Domitian was well known for. In ancient Greco-Roman cities, you have the agora. We'll see these in the Holy Land next week. But in the agora, this was the center place of the city. This was the marketplace. This is the place where you could buy and sell your goods. Domitian said, in order for you to go into the agora, you first have to enter my temple. And when you do, there will be one of my sidekicks there, and he's going to give you incense. Burn the incense unto me and worship me. And then after that, my sidekick will put a mark on your hand or your forehead. And this mark will be your entrance into the city. By the way, if you've ever read the book of Revelation, Domitian, Caesar Domitian, is the backdrop to this book. It is the context for Revelation. You might have heard of the mark of the beast. Early Christians referred to Caesar as the beast. And this mark would get them into the agora. Now, some Christians said, of course, we have to get this mark. We know Domitian isn't Lord. We don't really worship Domitian, but we just have to bow down to him and get this mark because the truth is we have families and we have children to feed. Now, there was this other group of Christians in the corner of the empire in this city called Ephesus. And they got together and they said, no, we're not bowing down to Domitian. We're not giving Caesar our worship any longer because our worship and our allegiance belongs to one person, and that is Jesus Christ. We're not bowing down to Domitian. So at the end of the first century, Christians in Ephesus began to disappear. Their pastors were sent into exile. In fact, if you read Revelation, that's how the book begins. John on the island of Patmos, who was sent into exile. But what's so interesting also about this time is this Christian movement in Ephesus began to grow. And it was like the more struggle they encountered, the deeper their faith went. The more struggle, the more things placed upon them, the deeper they went in their faith. And so I say this to say, bear in mind this context when you hear that popular Christmas story in Luke's gospel. Because Luke begins us in a very particular time, in a very particular place with very particular people. Remember, Luke chapter 2, he begins in the days of Caesar Augustus. And this decree was sent out where everyone had to go to their own towns to be counted for the census, for tax purposes. And so Joseph and Mary went down to Bethlehem, and this baby was born. And then these angels of the Lord go into the fields to the shepherds, and shepherds are absolutely nobodies in the first century. And they start proclaiming this good news, saying that a new king has come, something new is happening. And verse 9 in chapter 2 tells us the shepherds are absolutely terrified. Now, given that context, why would the shepherds be terrified? I want you to imagine for a moment this conversation between the shepherds and the angels. Angels, are you realizing what you're saying? Because if this story is true, this is a story that changes everything. Because what you're saying here is Caesar isn't Lord, but this little baby born in a manger in Bethlehem is Lord and the one to worship. What you're saying is Caesar isn't Lord. Do you realize the danger you're putting us in? We have lots and lots of Caesars in our world, don't we? You have yours, I have mine, and they all say similar things. I have Caesar. By the way, that's Domitian. I have Caesar consumerism. Caesar consumerism comes to me and says, Ryan, if you can just get this thing, then you will know true joy. Then you will be at peace. If you can just get this stuff, that stuff that you like. I have other Caesars. I have Caesar ego. And ego comes along and says, Ryan, if you can just figure out a way to get yourself at the center and to keep yourself at the center, then you will know salvation. Then you will truly be at peace. Have you ever been standing in a room with a group of people, maybe it's your friends or your family or colleagues, and someone next to you is talking about how great so-and-so is, and you know so-and-so, and your first thought is, no, I'm great. I'm great. And the sooner you realize that, the better you and I are going to be. The better we will get along. Oh, and then there's Caesar isolation, almost as brutal as Domitian. Because Caesar isolation comes along to me and says, Ryan, when you're struggling, when you have your deepest doubts, when you have your deepest questions, isolate. Don't let anyone know that. Don't let anyone see that. I was talking to a guy not long ago, and he was telling me that he felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. And he said he had all this pressure to perform at home, at work, and in every part of his world. And he was telling me that his go-to, his only escape that he has found has been through alcohol. And he was scared. And he said, it's not just my problem that scares me. I think this affects those I love most. And he said, we just found out my 14-year-old daughter is cutting. And he says, I'm scared. And I have all this shame. And I don't really see a way out of this vicious cycle. And shame, Caesar's shame comes along. And shame loves to take every piece of your identity. And just like Caesar Domitian and Caesar Augustus and all the other Caesars, this Caesar demands every piece of your worship. I think the core question for me of Advent is the story better than this? Is the Advent story better than this? And you see these gods, they come along and they say, just bow down to me and I will give you, I will grant you. And there are moments when you look around and it seems like everyone else is bowing down to these same gods, and you think, why bother resisting? Why bother resisting the Caesars? And then there are moments where you hear and you see Luke's angels coming onto the scene. And they say, no, don't believe it. Don't believe the things the Caesars are selling you. It's a lie. All of it. It's all a huge lie. These products, they're false. The Caesars, they'll promise you all these false things, but all of it, it's a fraud. The one who is to come, the one that we are proclaiming, is different. This is the one who has come to be with us. And emperors, Caesars, are never with you. They are always against you and over you. This is the one who came to struggle with us. This is the one who was born in a manger, not in the imperial courts. This is the one who was born not to take more power and prestige, but to actually give up his life and to show us the way of love. This God is always pulling us towards the things that matter. The Caesars of this world are always pulling us away towards the things of meaningless things, towards the things that are worthless. I was talking with a friend last week. We had coffee together. And he was telling me how recently his world has been turned upside down. And he was telling me this story of fear and unknowing and this story of great pain. And as he's telling me this story, he stops along the way and he smiles. And he says, but something really incredible happened last week. It was just me and my boys at home. and I found this great fish tacos recipe. And he said, so one of my boys, he started grilling the fish taco, the fish. And my other boy, he started making this homemade chipotle sauce. And I wanted some coleslaw with the fish tacos, so I made this homemade coleslaw. And he says it was kind of amazing because in the midst of all this fear and unknowing, and when my world was turned upside down, I was reminded in this moment of all the things I have that actually matter. You see, sometimes I think we need stories like these to remind us of what it's like to be terrified and rejoicing at the same time, to hold those two things in tension. And sometimes I think we approach Christmas and we try to take all of our fears and all of our questions and all of our doubts and we push them way deep down inside and we try to cover it all up with a big joy to the world because we look around and everyone else is doing the same thing. But I wonder what happens when we instead approach Christmas and Advent through the model of relationship. Because we know this actually creates stories of change. We know, just like those early Christians in Ephesus, something profound happens, something divine happens when we struggle together. Our faith deepens. Something happens when we together resist the Caesars. Something happens when we're vulnerable together. And if you're one of those people that says, man, I just want to keep my brokenness and my struggles, I just want to keep those inside. I don't want to share those with anyone. I don't want anyone to know. Can I give you this simple reminder? It is your struggle and your brokenness that will make you a safe place for other people. And I think we need more safe places. When my friend was talking about the fish tacos, and when I was driving home that night, I thought, that's the God of Advent that I'm looking for. I want that fish tacos God, where it can seem like everything around you is falling to pieces, things are getting turned upside down, but in the midst of all that, there is this moment where you're brought into the things of hope. There's this moment where you're brought into the things that actually matter. And so when it comes to Christmas, I know it can seem like just another event in your already busy schedule. And sometimes I think what we're really craving is just this simple hallelujah.